My name is George Colton. I'm 26 years old, and I work with Fashion Magazine Company in New Jersey. You can say that I was a child prodigy or something, because I completed my graduation at the age of 19. I was always focused on my studies, so I never got the time or a chance to ever date. I never even had a crush on a girl. No, I'm not gay. It's just, I never came across a girl who would pique my interest in dating or a relationship, except for her. But looking at what happened, I don't think we can count her as my love interest. There is something that I witnessed a few years back which completely freaked me out. I have realized by now that if you strongly don't believe in something, you always end up experiencing something which completely shatters your belief. Something similar happened to me a few years back. I've always been a working man since the completion of my education. After graduation and internship, I immediately landed a high-paying job in one of the best companies. You know, most people complain about workload and nasty work environment. It was never the case for me with this job. My boss was one of the most admirable women I have known. I loved working at that place, and I enjoyed my work as well. Everything was well and good, except for the fact that I worked on night shifts. Staying awake at night is one of the hardest things to do if you are working or studying, and my work required both. I was in the research department, so sleepiness was always lingering over me. It was around the time when I was a newbie in the office and knew absolutely nothing about the surroundings of that place. One night when I was reading some research materials related to an upcoming event that was supposed to be published within 2 days, I was feeling extremely sleepy. It was not like I did not take enough sleep during the day. Well, it was partially the case, but the main reason was this employee who was constantly boring me through his nonsense stories. "Hey George, I'm feeling sleepy, so do you want to come with me to Starbucks?" I guess Amelia took notice of my condition. That must be why she asked. But I never knew there was a Starbucks around our company. "Yes, please," I replied with an exhausted voice, which made her laugh, and I got to go with her. Our department was on the top 5th floor of the building, so we often used to take the elevator. But that day, the elevator was broken, and we went through the stairs to the basement. As I was about to take out the car, Amelia told me that there won't be a need for this because the Starbucks was just on the back side of the building. We walked to the outlet, and as we were entering, I noticed a girl who was wearing the Starbucks employee uniform, and she was sitting on one of the corner chairs. She was leaning her head over to the wall and was looking somewhere in a daze. I couldn't take my eyes off her. I mean, who would be able to? She was the definition of natural beauty. Her hair was tied in a messy bun. Her body was carved into a shape that looked defined even in her uniform, and her long, thick lashes were visible through the distance I was looking at her from. She blinked, and her gaze met mine, and I immediately looked away. Amelia asked me what coffee I wanted and went to order it. I sneakily looked at her, and she was lost again in her thoughts. During the entire time Amelia and I were there drinking coffee, she was sitting in the same spot and did not move an inch. I wanted to talk to her and stay there for longer, but I couldn't because I had to return to the office to finish my work. So I left with Amelia. As we were climbing up the stairs, Amelia was telling me something the entire time, but I was not listening because I just couldn't focus on her voice at all. And that wasn't all. I could not let myself completely focus on work either, because that was the first time in my life when I made a mistake while doing something. I was panicking about it because I realized this after submitting the final draft. The boss called me in and told me about the mistake, but instead of being angry at me, she told me to relax and that it was okay to make mistakes sometimes. The next day, I went to Starbucks again for coffee with Amelia and another colleague, and noticed that the girl was sitting at the same spot. She was lost in some thoughts again and was staring blankly into nowhere. It felt a bit weird, but I thought she may have some kind of stress or something. I found her at the same spot in the same position the next day after that, and the next to the next day after as well. So I figured that it must be her break time or something, but noticed that she was the only one taking a break and no one else took notice of her either. I was curious to know why she looked so sad and lost, so one day I decided to ask her, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice you. Do you mind if I ask what troubles you, miss?" After walking to her, I asked her. She turned her face toward me and stared at me with a blank expression on her face. That was when someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned. "Whom are you talking to alone?" It was Amelia, she asked me while laughing. I pointed to the girl and turned to see her, but no one was there. I thought, she may have left. "You know what, I'm always the one ordering. You order the coffees today." She pushed me toward the counter while saying that. When I went there, I saw there was a picture of the Employee of the Year, and the year that was written on that was 2 years back from that day. So I asked one of the employees about her. What he told me surprised me, and freaked me out at the same time. He said that she used to work here and was one of the best employees, but about a year ago, she committed suicide because of severe depression. He told me she was harassed by someone, and that person got her pregnant. She never told who it was, and often used to sit there staring blankly after her child was aborted. And one day, she committed suicide. I looked toward Amelia, who was looking at me with a smile without a clue. I took the coffee and walked towards her. Before leaving Starbucks, I looked in the direction where I used to see her, once again, but the chair was still empty. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. Sam, are you still hiring for that position? Senior Manager George walked into my office unannounced and asked me. I think so, but I need to check with HR first to see if they had already hired someone, I told him, focusing on all the paperwork present in front of me. It would be good if they did not, he said while taking the chair opposite of me. Pardon? I raised my head in confusion as I heard him say that. Well, it's because I have someone in mind. His tone was clear to interpret that he was trying to say hiring the person he was suggestive. Send the resume and HR will contact them for an interview date. I focused back on the documents and said in a calm voice. Now that's more like it. I'd be looking forward to a position answer from your end. He got up with a smile and said, walking out of my office. I know it was somewhat an informative sentence that he just spoke. He was telling me to only hire that person or he would make my life a living hell. I was working at this firm as a manager in a different department, so I was nowhere near under his jurisdiction. But since I was in the fashion department and he was in sales, the two of our works were always clashing. That was the reason I was always ignoring his bullying and continued to focus on my work, despite his weird remarks that I often tend to ignore because I wanted to work peacefully without having any bad blood between coworkers. I'm guessing he had caught up to it, and that must be the reason why he always tried to meddle in my affairs, just like today. But it didn't matter to me anyway. We needed to hire someone anyway, whether it was going to be someone he suggested. I was still going to conduct the interview fairly. I went to the HR department after that. I asked for the recruiter who was in charge of the hiring process for the fashion department. Guessing from his nervous expression, I figured he could not find a suitable candidate for the position yet, but I still had to ask because you never know. Mr. Pedro, did you fill a vacant position in the fashion department? My tone was rather strict, professional, and in response, he looked up to me replying hesitantly, No sir, but we are looking for it. No need. There's a candidate Senior Manager George is sending, so conduct a fair interview with them. And if the candidate gets selected in the second round, then conduct his final round with me. I gave him the instruction for the interview and then walked out from there. Since I still had many paperworks to look at, I went directly to my office and started working. About an hour later, someone knocked at the office door. I knew who it might be, so I told the person to come inside. And just like I predicted, it was the HR head, Jennifer. "Sam, did you ask my recruiter to interview someone from Connections?" She went straight to the point the moment she walked in. "Yes, I did. But don't worry, I have given clear instructions that the interview would be just like any other," I said, crossing my arms and giving my entire focus on her. "And who are you to give instructions to my HR? You know better that I don't like it when any of you try to meddle with my work. I can tell this to the director and both of you can get fired. You know that, right?" she said, slamming her hands on the table. "I know that, and you know this better than anyone, that I never interfere with the affairs of your department," I said. "That is exactly why I'm letting this slide just this once. But you better start standing up for yourself and stop being a pushover, or you're gonna make enemies. At least, I will be one." She walked out after scolding me. Her straightforward personality was one of the reasons why I liked her so much, and the way she always got angry when I was forcing to do something just because of him. But she knew very well that I did not like responding to his idiotic and childish behavior. But these days, it was just getting out of hand. That evening after finishing my work, I was heading outside the building when I walked by the smoking area and overheard George talking to someone about how he was 100% confident that even if the candidate he recommended bombed the interview, he or she would get hired. He claimed to know how to walk all over me and make me do whatever he wanted. Well, hearing that surely pissed me off. I took out my phone and dialed Jennifer's number. "Are you still opposing my choice to interview George's candidate?" I asked the moment she picked up. "Yes, why? Did you change your mind?" she replied, asking me. I did. And you said something about the director firing us if he knew of this. Can you inform him about this as well?" I said in a calm voice. "Sure, will do. Good decision, Sam." I could feel her big smile through her words, which were praising me. The next day after lunch, I was called into the director's office. As I walked in, I saw George already standing there with sweat beads on his forehead, ready to fall any second now. The expression on the director's face was of the angry beast who had just noticed someone crossing his boundaries. He was telling us that he received a complaint from the HR head about the connection hiring, which was strictly against the company rules. George tried to pin that on me, but the director got even angrier at this, saying he knew pretty well as Jennifer told him that it was his niece he was trying to get hired. "Sam, I'm letting you off with a warning this time, but George, you will be suspended for a week. Your abuse of your power you have acquired with your position. In the meantime, I will be getting your employees investigated to see if you had hired someone else with a connection. This better be the last time, or else you will be fired without any pay. You guys can go now." He gave his command, and the two of us bowed before heading out. "You did this, didn't you?" The moment we walked out, he charged at me, but I grabbed his hand with a smile. "So?" I replied calmly. "I warned you before that I can make your life a hell if you cross me," he said in a warning tone. "It's you who should watch out now." He flinched as I said that before walking away. Just because I chose to stay silent, he took it as my weakness. But he had no idea that despite his position, it was me who could make his life a living hell. He was the one who needs to watch out for his every step from now on if he doesn't want to get fired.
I have been helping deliver newspapers since my dad started as a carrier when I was 6. Eventually, my dad was given his own distribution center, so when I turned 16 and got my license, I started doing them on my own. Most of the people in the depot have been there for years. They've watched me grow up, and I consider many of them an extended part of my family. We spent every holiday together. The newspaper never had a day off. Countless birthdays. But there was one guy who always gave me the major creeps. I was about 14 when he started, I think. I used to hang out in the back office with some of my other friends as the years went on, and he always hung out back there because he was also friends with these people. At least that's what I thought. One of them recently told me they only tolerated him. I never spoke to him because something just felt really off about the guy, but nothing happened until last year. I moved home following my graduation from college. I was already having a hard time readjusting because I no longer had any friends in the area and I was missing my college town. Creepy guy that I'll just call B started hanging around me a lot. He had a weird man crush on my dad too, always buying him extra gifts for birthdays and holidays, sucking up majorly. I did my usual nice greeting, keep to myself stuff. But then he started buying me gifts for no reason. My mom told me to just keep them because it was all stuff I liked, Marvel and cat-themed things. That was probably my first mistake. He started acting like we were BFFs and coming out to find me while I was sitting in my car and talking about how I deserve so much more than being trapped here at the depot, and that he will do whatever it takes to get me out of here because he really cared about me and I deserve so much more. I never really acknowledged it because I thought it was really weird, and I thought if I just kind of nodded quickly he'd go away. This went on for weeks. Then he started texting me, telling me to sleep well after work and just being generally really creepy. I should probably mention I was 22 at the time, and this guy is well into his 40s. I started avoiding him, and he kept leaving things on my bench. I came in one day, and there were cat posters taped along the back of my bench. I kept taking them down, but they'd be back up the next day. When I started avoiding him, he made a Facebook group chat with me and my dad complaining about every little thing and just being a major jerk. He made a really rude remark about my friend who was visiting from Germany, so I blocked him on Facebook because I wasn't going to deal with it anymore. B made a new Facebook and remade the group chat just to keep doing it. I went away for a while on a vacation to visit my childhood friend in Washington, and when I got back, he was calling me by my full name, which I absolutely hate. I was tired and jet lagged, so I went off on him, and he whipped around and blew up 3 times worse, telling me I was all these terrible names, and I thought I was so perfect because I was the boss's daughter, and there was no one there as perfect as him. My jet-lagged brain broke down after he walked away. I'm glad I held on till he left, but I stormed out to my car and told all my guy friends to keep him as far away from me as possible because I was so fed up. He started texting my brothers, asking if they were on his side and if they had his back over mine. My roommate, who was a guy, started getting threatening texts from him about wanting to fight over me. Everything was spiraling out of control. My dad made us sit down at the local Denny's one morning to work everything out because he was so sick of B blowing up his phone. When my dad was there, things were fine. B said he wasn't mad at me, but I was just the catalyst the day of the fight and whatever. My dad left to pay the bill, and suddenly B's attitude changed. I was in the wrong, and treated him terribly, and all he ever did was love me, and I treated him so poorly. He kept trying to hold my hands over the table, telling me he loved me over and over. I put on a polite show because I just wanted this to end, and thought if I was nice about it, things would be different. Apparently my answer to everything is be nice and it'll go away. He walked me to my car after the conversation at Denny's and asked if I noticed anything different. I told him no, and he got agitated. Apparently he spent a lot of money on Captain America clothing, everything from a hat to shoes. I told him I didn't notice clothing like ever, and B got increasingly angry, telling me he did it to feel better about himself and impress me. Cap is my favorite superhero. I didn't even know he knew that. He had left the depot for a while, and when he asked to come back, I told my dad's manager I knew we were desperate, and I would be okay if I didn't have to talk to him. I wore headphones every day, my music full blast so I couldn't hear anything over them. He kept coming to my bench and would stand there waiting for me to acknowledge him, and he'd storm off angry when I didn't. He would glare at me if I ever talked to any other carrier, even though I'd been friends with many of them for years. My tipping point was something I found out after the fact. My guy roommate had gone to the grocery store late one Sunday. When he was walking to his car, he noticed some guy watching him. The guy watched him as he loaded the car and smoked a cigarette, and that's when my roommate realized it was B. My roommate got in his car and started driving home, and he noticed B was following him. He tried taking several wrong turns, and every time B followed. My roommate called his friend and said he was coming over, and when he said so, to open the garage to make it look like he lived there. When my roommate met his friend in the house, he told him everything, and they watched him drive by the house 8 times before leaving. No one called the police. I feel like that was the only thing that justified calling the police, because the harassment and stuff couldn't justify police action. I knew that from years of watching crime shows, and I was angry when I found out that no one called. I told my dad I wanted him gone. I couldn't take it anymore. Texts are easy to avoid, but now he was stalking us to try and figure out where I lived, since I wasn't living at home but renting a house with my brother and our friend. I spent months watching over my shoulder whenever I went to the store, worried he'd follow me home. After, he started going to my parents' house a lot because he knew where they lived, like he was waiting for me to be there one day. No one was taking this seriously. The gifts continued, and my mom kept telling me it was free stuff and to just keep it. But the gifts always came after something bad, and it was feeling oddly like an abusive relationship. Oh no, you're angry? Here's a gift to make you forget and like me again. My mom felt that way till her birthday, and a giant bouquet of roses and a teddy bear appeared at her job from B. We didn't even know he knew where she worked. After that, he started cornering me in the parking lot. I told him he'd been told to stay away from me and I'd appreciate it if he listened. "Look," he said, "I'm sorry I took you for granted. I never should have done that. Are we okay now?" I was floored. I told him if he thought that's why I was avoiding him, he was more insane than I thought. After that, he was done at the depot and I didn't see him for a while. A couple times I definitely saw him driving around on my route, but I couldn't prove it to a cop if I called it in. The last time I saw him, I was at my second job. I worked in a music store at a local mall. I was messing around with my coworkers when I turned around and saw him watching me from our hip-hop section. My stomach dropped. I almost collapsed and I started panicking. I ran him back and told my coworkers. They agreed if he asked they didn't know who I was and I could stay in the back till he left. I was a manager, but I didn't think I could actually kick him out because he was just watching me. My coworkers said he was there for almost 2 hours just wandering around. Never bought anything. It was like he was trying to wait me out, figuring I had to go back out front eventually. He texts my dad now and then trying to get his job back and fix things. My mom told him if he ever came near us again, she'd call the cops. When my dad wouldn't take him back, he started showing up at my uncle's depot and then started a group chat with him and my dad, saying they needed to sit down and talk. I was with my dad when my uncle called him about it. My dad called everything a misunderstanding. I said I didn't classify stalking as a misunderstanding. That day he came to my other job, I decided I was moving back to my college town 3 hours away. Home no longer felt like home. I didn't feel safe going anywhere. I still worry one day he's just going to show up in my new city. I transferred to the music store there. I had worked with these people my senior year of college, and they have looked out for me even after I moved. They all know the story, and I know they would all fight for me if it came down to it, so I feel safe, but I still panic when we walk to our cars after dark and have to check the parking lot to make sure he isn't there. It's been almost a year, and all I can say is I hope I never see him again.